Good morning. I hate to tell you I told you so, but I did. Yesterday morning I said the legislature was going to adjourn and there'd be no BC election in the foreseeable future for a number of reasons. There was no major massive confrontation yet with any of the groups. But the legislature passed what we interpreted properly as election goodies. The rate interest freeze, the Treasury bills, the Warren Commission was dumped, the mortgage easy payment plan. And it was just rolling towards an election when it didn't quite come off. The School Interim Services Act was passed with the cuts, 4%, says Vander Zalm. And he was in rare form last night when he spoke to a mixed audience of teachers and others in White Rock.
And you know, as Minister of Education, as you could tell from Morris' comments, we're often put to the test. And I'm sure that from now until my living days come to an end, I'll be reminded of right good. And I appreciate that. As a matter of fact, I think it's healthy that I should be put to the test, and I would recommend the same for teachers. If there are those of you here that would deny the 5,000 people working in the Northeast their job in the coal mines or their jobs on the mountainside, and if there are those of you that would deny the 500 people presently employed and the 2,500 people that will be employed within about a year on ALRT, or if there are those of you here that would deny the 500 people employed at BC Place, be they carpenters, cement people, or steel people, and there will be 1,500 employed within a year, then frankly, I would be ashamed as a British Columbia to even share in any way, by even listening to such suggestions, that view.
And then he got mad about a pamphlet which had been sent around yesterday, something in it that really set the education minister off. Here he goes again.
But be truthful, and I can sympathize with you. But please, when you hand out pamphlets, tell it the way it is. A lot of people are not happy because you're losing 4 or 5% in the pay increase you received earlier this year. That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. And I don't fault you for that. I don't fault you for that. I don't fault you for that. But don't say that education in British Columbia is being destroyed. Don't say it's at risk, because those are not only untruths, they're outright lies, and the people...
I would like to know why he says that young kids should be told by their teachers that they are losers. Now, how is that going to build up someone's self-esteem? How is that going to make them a winner? Mr. Vander Zalm may think he's a winner, but we have to teach students who may end up losing, and we try our best. And I'm not going up to some kid and telling his parent that I think that kid's a loser. I think Mr. Vander Zalm needs to take a course in becoming more compassionate towards those people who are less fortunate, those people on welfare, those people who don't have all the advantages in our society. And I'm getting tired of Mr. Vander Zalm going out and attacking the weak. Why doesn't he go after the strong sometime? Yeah. Sir, are you a teacher? Yes, I am. You're a teacher.
I have never said that teachers were losers. I have never said that youngsters were losers, but I would say that you're the biggest loser I've seen all night.
And there's no election call. Full report of that on BCTV News. In the studio this morning is Joan Wallace, who is the Commissioner for the Commission of Inquiry into Part-Time Workers in Canada. It's a 10-month job. She's through 6 months of it. And she'll tell us what she's found out bad and good for part-time workers. Also here this morning is a spokesman from Toronto on homosexuals and the law. His name is Ed Jackson. We'll talk to him later. And Steve Wyatt has been out working on a strange story in Burnaby, 20-story apartment block in Brentwood, where there are 28 empty suites. It's a mixed block, students and old age pensioners. Mary Kerr will tell you in detail later, but here she tells you now why these 28 suites are empty. A 22nd apartment block. There are, I think it's several hundred suites for students.
To justify except for cost, I think.
Something happened to the voice up, but you'll see the program in detail anyway later. These things happen even on Friday mornings sometime. But first off the top this morning, we're going to question Joan Wallace, the Commissioner, on the inquiry into part-time work in Canada. I don't mind telling Commissioner Wallace that I was a bit skeptical when I saw the appointment of you, not of you, but of the Commissioner of Inquiry into part-time work. I suppose I took the normal attitude. If you're a part-time worker, you're a part-time worker. You get paid cash for your job, and you don't get anything else. Now, how long have you been holding these hearings?
We started our hearings on the 1st of September in Ottawa, and we've covered 8 different cities. We finished yesterday in Vancouver.
Now, of course, it's unfortunate that you're doing this during a recessional period when the unemployment's at 1.3 million people. It's down a smidgen this morning to 12.2. But can you make any practical recommendations when you finish, which the country in a time of recession can afford?
Well, first of all, I'd like to emphasize that we were not set up, our commission was not set up to look into part-time work as a solution to unemployment.
Oh.
No, we were set up...
Oh, I thought that's what it was.
No, it wasn't, Jack.
No.
We were set up long before the unemployment picture got as bad as it was. And our mandate is to look into how part-time workers are treated compared to full-time workers. Are they being treated fairly? And what recommendations we can make. We could make, for example, recommendations that would suggest that part-time workers should be paid the same as a full-time person if they're doing the same job. We could recommend that they should have fringe benefits such as pension plans and dental plans if the company already gives those to their full-time workers.
And doesn't give them to the part-time workers?
Most of them do not give them to the part-time workers.
Are you inquiring into government as well as private business?
Oh, definitely, definitely. We're looking at the federal government and provincial governments
because
as well.
In some areas of the provincial government, what the part-time worker gets, the casual, is you get so many cents an hour to cover the fringe benefits, but doesn't actually get the fringe benefits.
And we've heard of even worse examples. One woman who worked for the BC government for nearly 20 years in a part-time job and was paying into the pension plan. She's almost at retirement age now and has discovered that she's not going to get any pension because there's a minimum number of hours per year that you have to work to get a pension.
She presumably will get her pension payments back with interest.
Well, she'll get her payments back at a very low rate of interest, but she won't get any pension and none of the employer's contribution.
And had the document said she was going to get a pension?
Well, I don't know about the document, but she certainly understood that she was getting a pension, or why would she pay into it for 20 years?
What about numbers of part-time workers? Who's the typical part-time worker? Female, of course.
Well, there's 2 typical part-time workers. One of them is a female. 72% of part-time workers are women. The females are usually between the ages of 25 and 44. They're working part-time because they have small children, and usually they're married. The other typical part-time worker is a student, young, male, and he's working part-time because he wants to work his way through university or high school.
Can it be said anymore that people are working part-time as we used to do it 25 years ago for pin money?
No, very definitely not. Today, with the economy the way it is, I think most people who are working part-time definitely need the money, whether it's to help pay the food bill or the mortgage or the rent, whatever it is, they're working because they need the money.
Did I see some horrifying prediction somewhere that by the year 2000 there might be more part-time workers than full-time workers?
Well, there was one prediction that half of us could be working part-time within 20 years. And certainly the trend is going that way when you look at the new jobs that have been created over the last 5 years.
Is that necessarily bad, though? I mean, if we were in a properly organized society, for a big dimension of the word, and you were sharing the work properly and computers take over everything, I suppose it would be idyllic if more than half of us were part-time workers. I'm a kind of part-time worker in a way.
Well, of course, you're what we call a seasonal worker, that you work full-time during certain months of the year and then take other months off. I think that there's a trend towards more part-time work because people appreciate their leisure. People really want leisure time today. And we're finding not only among women, but among men, that there's a definite interest in part-time work.
What about union membership in part-time workers? Do the unions rush out and enlist the part-time workers, either in government service or in private service?
The unions have traditionally been very opposed to part-time work, but we found, to our surprise, during the public hearings, that a lot of the unions have very definitely softened their attitude on part-time work.
Not much they can do for part-time workers, though, because does a part-time worker get protection of the federal and provincial statutes?
Well,
I mean, generally speaking.
There's no law right now that discriminates between a part-time and a full-time worker, and the treatment of part-time workers has more or less arisen through custom. But there's no law that says that you can pay your part-time workers less or that you don't have to give them fringe benefits. This has more or less just happened by custom. And the unions
but
now...
you know perfectly well that the unions, especially the craft unions, maybe they don't apply in part-time work, are very, very slow indeed to give anybody membership in any part of the union, except in great emergencies when they have qualified tradesmen out of jobs.
Well, the unions that are changing their attitude tend to be the unions that have a high percentage of women workers in those unions. For example, CUPE is now working very hard to get better benefits for part-time workers. They have a clause that they're asking all of their locals to get into their next collective agreement, a clause that says everything in this agreement applies equally to part-time workers. And they have won agreements that give fringe benefits to some of their part-time workers.
It's a very tricky situation indeed, though, is it not? You're looking at the whole country just now. How many, what's our labour force? Do you know offhand?
Not offhand, but 1.5 million of them are part-time workers, 13.5%.
Mind you, many of these are part-time workers purely by choice.
80% are by choice, but we're not sure that the reasons that they're giving for part-time work are quite valid. The labour force survey asked people, you know, why are you working part-time? And 20% say because they can't find a full-time job. Some of them, the others say because of family responsibilities. Now, we don't know if the ones who are working part-time because of family responsibilities would go back to work full-time if there were better daycare facilities available or better transportation.
Well, are you going to go into the field of recommending better daycare, better transportation? You really kind of Royal Commission into living conditions of part-time workers, perhaps?
Well, we're to look into all aspects of part-time work in Canada. And I should mention, we're not a Royal Commission, we're just a Commission of Inquiry.
A Commission of Inquiry. Well, I'll call our Royal Commission if you feel a little bit more important.
Oh, thank you.
So the prospects for part-time workers, really, in the present economic situation, is very poor indeed.
Well, not entirely. In some cases...
What are the industries that use most part-time workers?
The most part-time workers are in the service industries, and that includes fast food outlets, restaurants, laundries, in hospitals doing all the cleaning and dietary work in the kitchens, and also in retailing. There's a very large segment in retailing.
I mean, a married woman who goes out and works in the boutique 4 afternoons a week or 3 afternoons a week as a sales commission person.
That's right. And there's one large group that we had no idea were being exploited, and those are part-time lecturers in universities and community colleges.
I don't accept that.
They are being paid, we were amazed, and we've had a lot of briefs from them. They're being paid about half of what a regular professor gets. They have no job security. They never know whether they're even going to be hired for the next session until they find out how many people have registered for their course.
That's why they're all out beating the woods like nobody's business to try and jam their educational establishments with all kinds of phony courses, I suspect.
Well, I think the courses are being offered because people want them. If they don't get enough people to take a course, the course is canceled. And this is why I'm saying that these part-time lecturers, they might think they have a course, they've maybe been teaching it for the last 3 years, and suddenly not enough people sign up, so they're out of a job.
Joan Wallace, Commissioner of Inquiry into Part-Time Workers in Canada. More with Joan and your calls too after the break. It's early yet to talk about your recommendations, but you must be heading in some directions. And I'm interviewing Joan Wallace, Commissioner of Inquiry into Part-Time Work. Now, Canada Pension Plan. Do part-time workers presently contribute to the Canada Pension Plan?
They do if they're making a certain minimum number of dollars per year. They can contribute to the Canada Pension Plan, and it's usually deducted from their salary. If they're working less than that minimum, then they don't.
How about old age security? Of course, you pay your income tax regardless, don't you?
Well, the old age pension, everybody gets it regardless of whether they worked or not.
Right.
The Canada pension plan, you have to have worked to get that. UIC is another area that causes a lot of problems for part-time workers.
What's the problem there?
Well, if you work 15 hours a week, your employer contributes to UIC, and some is deducted from your check. But a lot of part-time workers might work 14 hours one week and maybe 16 hours the next week, and 13 and so on.
Oh, this is a common complaint in department stores in Vancouver, was it not? They didn't give them quite enough work because the employer has to contribute to the UIC benefit,
yes,
as well as the employee, the part-time employee.
That's right. And if an employer wants to exploit his workforce, he can have them all work 14.5 hours a week, and then he never has to pay anything into UIC. And if the person is laid off, they don't get any UIC.
So one of your recommendations might eventually be that everybody who works part-time, regardless, should pay contributions, and the employer should pay contributions to the Unemployment Insurance Fund.
Well, this is one of the things we're looking into, and it's interesting that UIC people as well are concerned about it because it's complicated for an employer. It makes more paperwork for him to have to
more
figure
civil
out
servants, more everything.
Each week, and they're looking at whether it would improve the whole system if people paid a percentage of their income into UIC rather than having the minimum number of weeks.
One area of part-time work we haven't covered, who knows what the complications are in hospital financing at the moment. It goes up and down like a yo-yo. Nurses. Many nurses choose only to work part-time for reasonably good money, don't they?
Well, most of the ones who are working part-time, it's because they have family responsibilities. And if you're working full-time as a nurse, you are subject to all the shift changes. Everybody has to take their turns on day, night, evening shift. And a lot of nurses with small children just can't do that.
So they
choose to work part-time.
They'll say, I'll work part-time because I can work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday from 6 till 1 in the morning, or whatever the shift happens to be.
Well, some of them, those are called the regular part-time. They know ahead of time what days they're going to be working. But there's another very large group of nurses who are on casual call-in basis, and they're called in when someone's sick or when people are on holidays, and they never know when they're going to be working until
Have you covered the whole of the country now, from coast to coast?
Yes, we've had hearings right from Halifax to Vancouver.
So therefore, the picture is the same all across the country. Are there any significant differences, say, between Quebec and British Columbia, Alberta and Ontario?
Well, the highest percentage of part-time workers is in British Columbia. Saskatchewan and Manitoba are the next highest. There's been a difference in the attitude of unions in Quebec. They have still a very traditional attitude to part-time work, which is they're opposed to it, that part-time workers are taking jobs away from full-time workers.
And you find the unions here, like CUPE you mentioned particularly.
Well, nationally, even the CLC, in their brief to us in Ottawa, said that they now feel that if a part-time worker is working part-time voluntarily, they want to work part-time, then the union should be fighting to get better benefits for them.
Basically speaking, however, the part-time worker, is the part-time worker normally happy? If it's a married woman doing bits and pieces, perhaps, she's probably quite happy in her status.
Well, I think they're happy working part-time. Most people choose to work part-time because they want to. They like their time.
But they have no job security.
But the thing that they're beginning to object to now is that they get no pension. They can work for the same employer for 20 or 25 years part-time, and they get absolutely no pension when they retire. They get no sick benefits, no dental plans, anything like that.
And no grievance procedure.
No grievance procedure.
And I presume a part-time worker can be disposed of at any time, providing the 4% holiday pay is paid.
Yes, and the other thing is that they are afraid to complain because the person who decides how many hours they work, the person who calls them in, if they rock the boat, they just don't get called in for very many hours next month.
Are you getting a picture of employers who deliberately exploit part-time workers to cut the cost of operations and save on administration?
Well,
and UIC contributions, etc., etc.
This charge has certainly been made in a lot of the briefs that we've received from women's organizations and from labor unions. But we've also heard from a few employers who are being very fair to their part-time workers. Nova Corporation, for example, in Alberta.
The big one, the government one.
Yeah, they presented a brief in Edmonton and told us that they have a policy of keeping 10% of their workforce as part-time workers to help move them in gradually to full-time jobs, to fill in for sick leave and so on. And they make a point of paying them fringe benefits prorated according to how many hours they work.
You haven't found any such enlightened employer in British Columbia?
Well, we found one who would like to do that.
Who's that?
BC Transit. They are very anxious to get some part-time bus drivers to, and this is a big issue in labor relations right now, is whether bus drivers should be or can be hired to work part-time. The unions are strongly opposed to it because right now they work split shifts. They work part of their shift in the morning and part of their shift in the afternoon. They get shift differentials and they get overtime for working later and make fairly good income. And they are very opposed to allowing part-time workers in to drive buses during the rush hours.
That's the old union fear. If you get a part-time worker and you only use them for 4 hours, presently the guys are doing quite well when they work in the morning, go play golf during the day, and then work again in the evening rush hour. And that's not a snide remark. That's how it works in some ways.
I realize that, but the transit commissions in major cities are saying that it costs them a lot of money to operate that way, that it would save the taxpayer money if they could have certain bus drivers, maybe older retired bus drivers or bus drivers who want to work part-time.
There's strikes over that one, I'll tell you, in BC.
Oh, well, Montreal they've been striking quite regularly in Montreal over that one. And the first city that has won an agreement to use part-time bus drivers is Edmonton. And they have an agreement with their union now that they can gradually introduce them on a trial basis, and it has to be with the agreement of the union.
Now, 6 months you've been at this. Do you have a time limit, I trust, on your commission?
Yes, we have a 10-month time limit. Our report is due in January of '83, and we, so far, are right on schedule and on budget, and expect to have it completed by then. Are
you a single commissioner?
I'm a single commissioner, and I have a staff of 5 people.
Well, you're not wasting public money, I trust, staying in fancy hotels or doing anything that Liberal Party people normally do.
As a matter of fact, we're traveling on SkySaver and Skybus.
You're traveling on Skybus?
Yes, to save money, because our more or less sample budget that was given to us when we started suggested that we could have hearings in 5 different cities. That's all the money that was available. We felt it was very important to have a lot of public hearings so that part-time workers could have an input. So we worked our budget so that we've had hearings in 8 different cities, including Yellowknife.
Traveling on the cheap?
By traveling on the cheap.
You're too good to be true.
By staying in second-rate hotels.
Second-rate hotels?
Well,
not the Hyatt Regency.
Not that, no.
Not the Bayshore.
And we get the government rate.
Not the Vancouver.
No, we get the government rate in whatever hotel we stay in. We've been operating very much within our budget and expect to come in under budget.
Questions to Joan Wallace, the cheap commissioner. I don't mean it that way. Commissioner traveling on the cheap and Skybus.
And SkySaver.
And SkySaver.
That's Air Canada.
Oh, that's Air Canada and CP.
That's right.
You're not flying CP, are you?
Sometimes.
Oh, good for you. After the break.
I'm not telling you my age, whatever it is.
Joan Wallace, the Commissioner on Part-Time Work, Commissioner of Inquiry, has probably had all the problems before, but maybe some other people haven't, so let's try. Go ahead to Joan Wallace.
Yes, I'd like to comment on a couple of situations you had there. One was when I worked with a big firm called Safeway here, their part-timers are treated very, very well, I think. We get, even more money than full-timers, except we don't get the French benefits.
But you got full rates?
Yes.
Anything else?
Yes, when I taught at the colleges, though, it was totally unfair. I mean, as she said, you don't know if you're teaching from one session to another.
How much did you get for that job?
For which one?
The college job.
It was less than full-time professor would get.
How much?
I get $2,000 a term.
$2,000. How long was the term?
It was 4 months.
What were you teaching?
I was teaching anatomy.
Anatomy?
Yes.
Are you a doctor now?
No, I've got a master's degree.
A which?
A doctor's degree.
Now, what about Safeway? How much do they pay you?
It's about $50 an hour.
Not bad for packing groceries.
Well, no, I'm working night crews and stuff like that.
Okay, boy, much obliged. There's a plug for Safeway.
They have a union agreement. The retail clerks actually have negotiated a fairly good agreement for their part-time workers that anyone who works 20 hours a week or more gets the fringe benefits. But we've heard, and this is the case for all supermarkets in BC, but we've heard that the store manager who allows anybody to work more than 80 or more than 20 hours a week is in trouble.
So I see.
That
But they still get a comparable to union rates for whatever work they're doing.
They get paid well, they get the same pay, but they don't get the fringe benefits unless they work 20 hours or more, and there's an effort made to make sure they don't work 20 hours or more.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, I'd like to enlighten your speaker about the 15 hours a week UIC.
Yes?
It is 15 hours or $70.
15 hours or $70.
Right. And that has been in effect for 2 years. Last year it was 15 hours or $63, so most people contribute.
Even if they're working a certain number of hours?
Yes, they can either work 15 hours or earn $70 a week.
And how much would they have to be paid an hour to earn $70?
Well, you divide 70 into 10, that's by $7 an hour.
So anyone making $7 an hour? Well,
anybody making $70 a week.
Well, a lot of part-time workers, though, are paid the minimum wage or slightly above
it. Oh, yeah, but the ones in the stores are not. They're making $8 to $9 an hour.
In retail stores?
Right, yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Ms. Wallace, about the part-time bus drivers. Could I bring to your attention what happened in Seattle a couple of years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Part-time bus drivers. Maybe you phone Seattle and see what happened.
Just tell me.
Well, their accident rate went up by quite a lot.
Part-time bus drivers have more accidents than full-time bus drivers.
Well, they're a lot better.
We can't really justify that or prove it either way, can we?
Well, there's so
yes, you can, Seattle.
Okay.
Well, I was going to say that in Canada there are practically no part-time bus drivers, so it's almost impossible to say what their accident rate is.
Go ahead from Victoria, please.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
I have been unwell enough to work regularly, and last year they found out what was wrong with me. But when I go to get part-time work in order to regain my self-respect, to be able to keep myself, even in part, the Public Service Commission in Victoria and the training programs, I'm 61, will not entertain this idea of me going for part-time work. It must be full-time.
Well, this is definitely a problem in a lot of organizations, and this is one of the areas that we're very interested in is how do you get part-time work if your employer doesn't want to give it to you? And one of the new ways that's being used a lot in the States is what they call job sharing. And this is where a job that has previously been held by one person is done by two people. They have joint responsibility. And in the States, there were a lot of women's organizations who decided they wanted to work part-time in sort of higher level jobs than they had than were available as part-time. For example, teachers, social workers, librarians. And they went to employers, municipal governments and hospitals and colleges, and persuaded them to allow them to do job sharing. So I would suggest that you find another person in the government who would also like to work part-time and see if you can have your job created as a job sharing position.
Oh, the Public Service Commission wouldn't go for that, would they?
No, they wouldn't.
Maybe not right now, but I think there's a definite trend towards more part-time. In fact, in the States, the federal government there, in Jimmy Carter's period, brought in more or less an affirmative action program to encourage more part-time jobs in the federal public service. And they told every federal government department that they had to have a certain quota of part-time workers, and they had to be at all levels. They couldn't just hire them at the bottom.
Have we got that in our federal government at all?
No, definitely not. Our federal government has 1% part-time workers.
What about age, though? This woman is 61. That's almost a barrier of discrimination or no, is it not?
Well, if they're refusing to hire her because of her age, then she should go to the Human Rights Branch and discuss it with them.
That's not easy to prove.
No, it's impossible to prove.
Well, it wouldn't hurt to discuss it with someone at the Human Rights Branch and find out, because you don't have to lay a complaint. You can go and discuss it with them without laying a complaint and find out whether you have any grounds to lay a complaint.
Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Oh, yes. I phoned up to be very critical of the lady there. She was talking in generalities, and I wanted to call her Mrs. Bassford or something like that, but...
She's not Mrs. Bassford.
Well, the fact of the matter is that really she's come up with a lot of the facts. When she was talking about Canada Pension there, I thought that she was just using a generality. They didn't require, they didn't meet the requirements, but she hasn't spelled that out, but she spelled out the UIC and the rest of it. And personally, after hearing Skybus and the rest of it, I feel that we need more people like this doing government work, and it's nice to see a lady getting the job, and I don't want her to name the political party that's in power now, because really it's a credit to them.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your call.
Joan Wallace is not a lady, she's an ex-reporter. Is that correct?
Well,
of course.
I'll leave it to you.
I'm making a joke.
Okay.
Right, in case you didn't get it. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I've been very interested in Mrs. Wallace's commission. The only reason that I didn't attend or anything is because I've been working as a temporary for the federal government. And I worked in Calgary part-time from 1966 until 1978 when we moved to the coast. I worked for an engineer for 8 years. I worked for Shell Canada part-time. I worked at a hospital part-time and flex-time. And I received benefits everywhere. And I'm very interested in what she is doing.
Who is your best employer as a part-time worker?
Actually, the petroleum engineer in Calgary, I think. But I've had some very good ones. I worked at the Foothouse Hospital there who were excellent.
Did you finish up with the Canada Pension Plan contribution at all?
Oh, yes, at all of them.
What about extra benefits, such as extra medical plans or dental plans or sick leave? Did you get those types of benefits?
Well, I got those at Shell Canada when I worked in public relations, yes.
Let me ask you a question. I thought every employer had to pay Canada Pension Plan for every employee.
Well, right now they pay Canada Pension Plan for most employees who are working, you know, a minimum number of hours. But the big criticism of the situation now is that large companies and governments who pay fringe benefits to their full-time workers, these are extra fringe benefits, and they can amount to 30% of the pay package. Those are denied to most part-time workers.
Another section of calls with the Skybus traveller, Joan Wallace, the Sky Saver flyer, and on a government appointment too, after the break. Joan Wallace, Commissioner of Inquiry into Part-Time Work. Do any of the big operations, or the small ones, have a plan whereby they phase older people into retirement with part-time work?
We've found very few, but I think it's a growing trend. There's a lot of people that we've talked to who are very interested. Their children are grown up, their house is paid for, their car, they're working now 40 hours a week, and they don't really need the money. There are people maybe where both spouses are working, and they would love to work a 4-day week, or perhaps work 1 month on and 1 month off.
You get a job at Vancouver City Hall and you've got a 4-day, 35-hour week. I work for the government. You've got flex time and all kinds of wonderful benefits that ordinary people don't have.
You can't change jobs when you're 55 years old. So
I was just getting in a crack.
That's true. They are interested in some way that they can work part-time and gradually phase out into retirement. And there's a lot of other people who are 65, and today 65 isn't old. People are in good health, and a lot of them would like to work part-time after 65.
I'm not so sure of that.
But what we're finding is that there's no way they can do it now because of the way our pension system is set up. For example, your pension is based usually on either your last 5 years of work or your best 5 years, and that tends to be the last 5.
Ah, so if you're part-time, that might cripple your pension.
Yeah, if you work part-time in those last 5 years, it has a very disastrous effect.
Next call from Prince Rupert. Hello, that's you, ma'am.
Yes, Mrs. Wallace?
Yes.
I'm sorry to backtrack on you here, but I'm concerned about deductions for UIC. I work in a payroll clerk here, and the charts begin at about $20, and we have been told by the local office that we have to deduct UIC and CPP even when people are under the 15 hours or $70. Could you clarify for that for us?
Well, I'm sure as a payroll clerk, you probably know more about it than I do. Yes. But by the time we make our recommendations, we have one research project going on all government legislation affecting part-time workers. And we will certainly, find out just exactly what the situation is. My understanding was that it had to be 15 hours a week, but I'm sure if the UIC office told you differently, you better do whatever they say. And what we're looking into is whether it would be possible, and I'd like to ask you a question. Would it be easier for payroll clerks if there was a percentage deduction based on a person's hourly wage rather than having to watch whether they work 15 hours a week or a certain minimum number of dollars?
A percentage makes it quite easy, especially with a large payroll that's on computer, then you just have the percentage in the machine and away it goes.
So you think it would be easier if that system was used, eh?
Yes, but then on the other hand, I don't think it's quite fair if people aren't going to qualify for UIC premiums. you know, when they are laid off.
Oh, well, they would have to change.
Have to contribute.
Yeah, this rule, they would have to change the UIC regulations that you would benefit according to the number of dollars you had paid into UIC. And it wouldn't be based on how many hours you worked, but rather the amount of money you had put into UIC.
How old's the baby?
4 months.
4 months. Are you working part-time?
I have worked part-time, and as a union organizer, I have tried to get benefits for part-time workers.
How are you making
so
out?
I really think it's good that there's a commission, and I hope that you'll get some benefits going for these part-time workers.
Okay.
What about your union? What's their attitude to part-time workers?
I'm in Sorwalk.
Sorwalk.
We've always tried to get part-time workers included.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, okay, Miss Sorwalk.
Thank you.
Best of luck to you and your baby.
Yes, goodbye.
Yeah, noisy little thing, isn't he? Probably a boy, I should imagine.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah, just to feed it, keep him full of food.
Yes, well, noisy. Women are noisy now too, Jack.
Oh yeah, you were quite mouthy about the women's movement, weren't you?
Yes, that's true.
Quite evocative, I should say,
Yes,
not mouthy.
yes.
Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes.
I've been part-time for 5 years, and I was wondering if, like, I've had sick time, I've had 2 operations and a car accident, and it's being sort of held against me for a full-time position, yet I work the 40 hours a week, and I work all the shifts, and I work 7 days a week.
Just a minute, you're not a part-time worker, are you?
Well, I'm still an auxiliary employee. I have been for 5 years.
Now, are you with the government?
Yes.
The BC government?
Yes.
You might be one of the 1,500 scheduled to be taken on full-time.
But every time I get an evaluation and I've gone upstairs, you know, and I've written them a letter telling them that I'd like a full-time position, because I've tried for the night shift and only the full-time people can get on to the nights, and they've held it against me that I've had sick time. But this was, like when I am working and after my accident, I've only had 2 sick days.
Well, I think the problem isn't necessarily that you've had sick time off. I think it's a definite government policy of both the federal government and all the provincial governments to use a lot of auxiliary workers because they, first of all, they don't have to pay them benefits, but an even more important reason is that they don't have to show them on their rolls as full-time workers. And there's been a lot of criticism of governments over the last
I think this is a problem for John Flyer's boys. You're a BCGEU employee, are you?
Yeah.
Well, you gotta get after your union guy. I mean, you're not involved in the part. Yeah, you are involved in a way, but you have a specific problem with the BCGEU, hasn't you?
Well, I think it's not just, well, it is a union problem, and the union is trying to fight it. But what it is that in a lot of workplaces, and not only the government, there's a lot of people that are classified as casual call-in or auxiliary workers. And they're called in, some of them are working up to full-time, but they are not given any benefits, and they might be considered casual workers for 20 years. And as a result,
like the woman you were telling us about, who paid into a pension plan but apparently isn't going to get it.
That's right. And the reason that the government doesn't want to make these people full-time workers is that there's been a lot of criticism of governments for having too large a public service. So if they keep all these people as auxiliary workers, they don't have to count them in as full-time workers in the government.
Go ahead to Joan Wallace.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the government issue. I'd like to bring up an issue that a trick that they pulled.
Bring up the sound a little too.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me now?
Not really. Go on,
okay, I'll talk louder. How's that?
That's better.
Okay, I'd like to bring up an issue that the liquor board uses. They'll hire people on an on-call basis and tell them that they're on call, but then quite often they only get very little work. I know one woman in this area who's only had 1 day's work in the last 4 months.
Well, that's nonsense. She's obviously not on call.
Well, that's what they tell her, and that's the terms that they hire them on.
In other words, she can't go for any other job while she's on call.
That's exactly it. There's also a limit that says that while she's hired by the liquor board, she can't have a job anyplace else except with their permission.
Have you heard of that one at all?
Yes, we have heard of that. A lot of people who have been on call and very rarely get called. This is, I think, a problem. I would suggest to people like that they go and look for another job. If you're not getting enough calls to, you know, to earn the money that you need, just look for another job.
Tough luck, though, isn't it? Especially just
today,
now.
Yeah, today it's very difficult.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. I just wanted to correct a previous caller who called in and said that retail store employees get more than $7 an hour. I happen to work part-time, and I'm the highest paid of 3 employees, and I get $6 an hour, and I work maybe 2 7-hour periods in a week and maybe a 4-hour day, which doesn't add up to the
to the 20 hours a week, and it doesn't add up to more than $7 an hour.
But let me ask this woman a question, seeing that we're both a little shy in this. When you're laid off, do you get unemployment insurance?
No.
Do you make contributions to UIC?
Yes, I do. Of course, I've never been laid off yet.
I wonder what happens to the benefits.
Well, I don't think if you're working fewer than 15 hours a week, or do you work 15 hours a week?
She's doing 18.
Oh, 18 hours a week. Oh, well,
Yeah.
then yes, you would make contributions.
Yes, I do make contributions.
Well, you should qualify then if you're laid off or if you're sick.
Well, I haven't been laid off, so...
Okay, ma'am, thank you very much. And thank you too, Joan Wallace.
Well, thank
Can I
you.
have you back when you make your recommendations?
Yes, I'd love to come
Which
back.
will be ready by when? Christmas?
We're making them to the minister by January. Then they have to be printed before we can release them
both
to the public.
languages?
We are producing them in both languages here in
Are you
Vancouver.
doing this bilingual?
We have a bilingual person on our staff who is a qualified translator, and we're going to produce it in English and French both, right here in Vancouver.
We'll see you in your recommendations.
Thank you.
My thanks to Joan Wallace. Next, Ed Jackson from Toronto, a spokesman on homosexuals and the law. After the break. Every now and again, a publication called Politic appears in the print side of its operations in Toronto. It's a publication for homosexuals. And even I suppose, must put my nose into the social mores of this particular century now and again to try and understand what's going on. And my particular interest in the interview this morning is the influence as a voting group of homosexuals. With me is Ed Jackson, one of the editors of the body Politic. Did Sewell lose his job in Toronto because he double-crossed the homosexual voting bloc?
No, I think he lost the election because he was a very progressive and outspoken mayor, and people aren't used to that in Toronto.
You mean I've got it upside down? He lost his job because he came out and spoke in favor and sympathetically towards the group of organized homosexual voters in Toronto.
He said a lot of things. He opened his mouth on a lot of things.
For instance, what would he say that would cause the average voter to say, I'm not going to vote for Sewell?
Well, he was very critical of the police. There were a number of incidents in Toronto around the police that he spoke up about. And, for example, there was a black man who was murdered by 2 policemen in his own home. It created a tremendous amount of uproar in Toronto at the time.
Was somebody charged with, were the police charged with the murder?
Well, it took a long time for some kind of charge to be laid.
Was a charge laid?
A charge was laid, but they were finally exonerated. But it took a long time, and initially it was going to be a whitewash within the police department. And as mayor, he was critical of the police, and people didn't like that. They said he was being, it's not what the mayor should do.
In other words, people of Toronto said, we want a mayor who will close up all these, what they regarded as obnoxious places on and around Yonge Street. And it comes back to me now where they broke into them and charged the inmates with being inmates of a body house or something like that. Am I correct?
Well, they were steam baths, gay steam baths, and the police raided those steam baths in February of '81. There were about 150 policemen used to go into these places, and they charged about 300 people as found-ins in a common body house.
What happened in the final disposition of these cases?
Well, the final disposition is that of those 300, about 260 of them have been acquitted.
I see. Now, there was another big occasion. The body Politic itself was charged with an offense under the criminal code because of sexually explicit material involved in pedophilia. Am I correct in that?
Well, it was an article that discussed pedophilia, yeah. It was called Men Loving Boys Loving Men.
And this was a criminal charge was, under the criminal code was laid against the body Politic.
That's right, and we went to trial. We've gone to trial twice on that. We've been acquitted twice, and the Crown has appealed that again. So we may be going to a third trial on a charge that the courts appear not to be very interested in charging us with, or
in other words,
convicting us.
You say it's a double and potentially triple jeopardy on the same material.
It appears to be, and on a summary conviction case, which is what this is, it seems that someone else is interested in pursuing us for other reasons, and even the Globe and Mail is beginning to say that maybe the Attorney General, Roy McMurtry, has other reasons, possibly to gain votes for himself, if he's seen to be bashing the gay community, then that's in his interest.
Yeah, I can understand that particular aspect. Fortunately, it hasn't raised its head yet in British Columbia or even in Vancouver as a real issue, has
You
it?
mean the government using gay bashing as a way to gain votes? That hasn't raised its head.
Well, I would say politicians currying favor with specific groups who are not in particularly good order with the average suburban voter.
Right.
That would be a better, more accurate way to put it, wouldn't it?
Well, I'm not sure if it's accurate. No, I think it's probably saying that we want to get votes any way we can. If there's an unpopular group who have very few rights embedded in any human rights code or charter of rights.
But surely the Charter of Rights will be your charter in that there can be no discrimination of any kind under this charter, which you can't test in front of judges now instead of in front of politicians. You must welcome the Canadian Charter of Rights.
Well, the Charter of Rights will be very interesting. There will be a lot of tests of it. But as you remember in the whole discussion about the creation of it, it was very important that certain categories be actually embedded in the Charter of Rights, and it's not sufficient to have a general one. It may well be that we can test it in the general equality provision. There's one, Section 15, I think, which doesn't come into effect for 3 years, but it remains to be seen what the decisions will be.
And all the tests of the Charters of Rights are subject to what is, I think the phrase is reasonable in the current climate in Canada, or what's that effect?
That's right, and that's a very elastic term.
Mind you, that's a very good protection for people, because well, sure,
we don't know if it will be. We certainly hope it will be, but the tests will have yet to be made.
I've always been against the Charter of Rights on the basis that I'd rather have the politicians change a law than judges interpret what they think the law is supposed to mean.
Well, it seems that judges are probably a little less amenable to the requirements of voting and being re-elected, and so because
they're all political appointments anyway. So
well, some of them are political appointments,
yes.
But they may well be rather good lawyers at the before they're appointed judges.
Are homosexuals oppressed in Canada at the moment?
Yes, I think homosexuals are oppressed in Canada at the moment, and it's one of those things that's very difficult to document because everybody knows that there's a great distaste of homosexuality, and you yourself admitted just before we went on the air that you find it a very uncomfortable subject.
An uncomfortable subject. I mean, I don't want to show my particular prejudice as bigotry, but it's a tricky subject to handle.
Right, it makes people very uncomfortable, and therefore they don't want to
tell you this. I don't see any need for special protection for any group other than the laws available now.
Well, these aren't special protections. This isn't any more special than any other protections.
But I'm protected under the law, guilty or innocent. I'll get my test one time or another.
You are, but gay people are not.
So are you.
No, I'm not.
Why not?
Well, because it's very easy to fire a gay person in any province in this country except Quebec. If you're gay, it's possible to kick someone out of their apartment or their house.
To be homosexual are grounds for firing. Is that correct?
Well, there's nothing that would prevent the people from doing it.
No, come on. Now, I don't know of any case where a man has been fired in British Columbia on the grounds that he is or she is an homosexual.
All right, but the real problem is no one is interested in doing that. People are clever enough now not to be that obviously bigoted. They find other reasons that are a little more difficult to find. There's one case. You
expect everyone to be obviously bigoted. Prejudice,
well, it'd be much easier to detect.
Another section was Ed Jackson after the break. Just on a very basic question to Ed Jackson of Body Politic. Now, we got off the thread. Homosexuals as a voting group. Are you organized in Toronto actively as a voting group?
No, there was one effort to organize gay people as a voting group in the November 1980 municipal election in Toronto, and there was some success, and it was organized around the candidacy of an openly gay person, George Hislop, who was running for alderman. He was defeated.
Any idea of numbers?
No, and no one knows how many gay people there are. The trouble is that there's no statistics that can be kept because Stats Canada doesn't ask you, are you homosexual or are you heterosexual?
I should certainly hope they don't ask you about your sexual life no matter what you are. You wouldn't want them to.
Well, that's not asking. Well, that's not asking people.
Do you want as a separate category on the census forms, male, female, homosexual?
No, it certainly wouldn't be male, female, homosexual. It would be male, female, heterosexual, homosexual.
Male, female, and then you break down male to heterosexual, homosexual.
No, you'd break down female, heterosexual, homosexual. Sure, that would be the only way. When you ask how many gay people there are, then it's the only way to know.
You won't get it this 50 years in the sense
I don't think it's the way to do it. I don't think it really matters. There are many people out there.
That's the point I make. It doesn't really matter. What your private sexual proclivities are surely your business.
Well, you don't know anything about private sexual proclivities. All you know is that someone is attracted to someone of the same sex, and what people do in their bedroom, you have the same idea.
Isn't San Francisco the one town in North America where the homosexual, I keep saying homosexual, you keep saying gay.
Yeah, why don't you like the word gay?
Gay is a misuse of a perfectly good old English word, which meant happy.
Oh, come on.
Gay. You know, gay.
You must have found a script somewhere. Everybody keeps raising that one. I mean, it's
I was brought up
English language
using the word
changes.
gay is about a person. Isn't he nice and gay, jolly?
Yes.
Doesn't mean homosexual.
Well, why don't you still use it that way? We haven't stolen the word.
Because you've stolen the word.
No, we haven't. You can still have it. You can use it any way you want.
San Francisco, is it correct that there they have a voting bloc which controls the mayoralty of San Francisco?
No, it doesn't control the mayoralty. It certainly is a power block, a voting block, like many other power blocks in that city. That's all. And they're listened to.
But it's an identifiable.
Oh,
I remember
it's identifiable.
Feinstein saying she was faced with a block. Feinstein, is that right?
She's the mayor. Feinstein. Dianne Feinstein.
189,000.
I don't know where she gets her figures. I mean, people are always coming up with these figures, but it is certainly a block that has to be listened to. It can't be ignored.
In the criminal code, are you discriminated against as a matter which you want the criminal code to be corrected?
Well, there are certain statutes in the criminal code whereby gay people are often charged. Homosexuality is not listed there per se. Gross indecency, indecent act, indecent assault, male, all these are used in a particularly selective way, I think, against gay people.
Are our laws, from your point of view, as progressive, if you want to use that word, I don't, as the British laws?
Well, our laws are based upon the British laws.
But our criminal code is different from the British criminal code, as
I'm
you're
not
well
sure.
aware.
Yes, I'm not sure if these
But
are...
in that aspect, are they more permissive than we are in Canada?
I don't think so. I think it's about the same.
How about the United States?
The United States depends upon the state. The Constitution has been used for challenging a lot of things. There's so many states that have sodomy laws in the books. There are no such things in Canada.
Anymore?
Anymore. I don't think there ever... Well, yes,
Yes,
there were a long time ago, but in '69 the criminal code was amended so as an exemption that consenting sexual acts between consenting adults in private over 21 were not illegal, but that's still
and it's been amended again. Has it been amended again?
No, it hasn't been amended again.
There is an amendment on the books at the moment?
Well, there have been some efforts.
In the omnibus bill for the criminal code?
Yeah, there were some efforts to change age of consent, but those were dropped in the last Parliament. And now there's again a decision to try to change the criminal code again and recodify it. But it's clear that the government drops these things very quickly if they seem to be hot potatoes.
What changes do you want in the laws at the moment? I can't see any need for any changes in the law whatsoever, in that we have a criminal code. It seems to be fairly permissive.
But it isn't. It's used very selectively, and the body house laws are a good example. They were used...
Body house laws are used both against female, or what do you call them, normal prostitution operations, and I presume against gay steam baths where money is paid.
Yes, but one of the problems is that it's defined
I said gay, homosexual steam baths.
You said it, see, it creeps up on you, doesn't it? The body house laws say it's a place resorted to for acts of prostitution or acts of indecency, and no one knows what acts of indecency are. If it were actually defined, then it would be much better, and it's the fact that someone has to define what indecency is. It's a moral term which shouldn't even belong in the criminal code, and those sorts of things should be removed, and they should be defined more clearly.
Standards which are acceptable to the majority of the people in the community.
But if you have standards, they should be objective standards that can be defined clearly, and not words like immoral, indecent.
Anything which encourages attacks on children with or without their knowledge or consent is obviously against public interest, good taste, and the standard of morality.
Well, nothing encourages attacks on children. What we would say is that children are sexual, young people are sexual, and that should be recognized in the law.
But not recognized at the hands of hard-nosed adults.
Hard-nosed adults. Well, you have to at least have to have protection. Sure, you have to.
Of course, you must have protections.
Yes, but
against children, no matter who they are or what they are.
But let's
face it. Protected.
But let's face it. The law doesn't really recognize people's sexuality. For gay people, consent begins at 21. For heterosexuals, it's at 18 and down to 14, depending on whether women are married or not.
So you want,
and you know the people have sex before that everybody has.
You want the age of consent for homosexuals to come down to the age of 18?
Well, at least. In fact, I think the age of consent laws probably should be abolished. They should be redefined in different ways.
I think there we should end the interview, because I'm not about to ask the next question whatsoever. But I'm glad you were here this morning. Homosexual spokesman, not that gay in terms of happiness.
Come on, say gay.
Ed Jackson of the Body Politic. I'll be back after the break. Brentwood House is owned by the government. It's 20 stories and hundreds of suites in Burnaby. At the moment, there are some 28 empty suites which had been occupied by seniors. And there's a great problem of dividing the building between seniors and students. Steve Wyatt reports on the suites at Brentwood.
Jack, the BC Housing Commission has a list of over 3,000 senior citizens who are waiting for a place to live. Here in Burnaby at Brentwood House, there are 28 empty suites, and they will stay that way until the 21 seniors who still live in there are gone. The vacancies have been accumulating over the past 2 years while the provincial government decides what it wants to do with this building that was bought by the previous NDP government in 1974.
The pinball machines moved in about the same time, not for the seniors, but for students from the Pacific Vocational Institute and BCIT. The NDP couldn't fill the building with seniors, so the upper 14 floors were rented to students for a daily charge. The experimental mix of pinball wizards with the bridge set was a success in the beginning, but the building is now considered inadequate for long-term care, more by the government than by the people who live here.
They said it wasn't economically feasible to keep the seniors here. Mr. Robertson came here and...
He's from the BC Housing Commission.
From the BC Housing, yes. He came in, he addressed us, and he made that statement, whereupon I got to my feet right away and said, that's your fault, not ours. I said, because I said, there's 10 rooms vacant right now. I said, and that would go some way towards the economics.
So what do you think's going on?
Well, I just don't know what's going on. They struck this committee to look into the possibility of different uses for this building, and they were supposed to have their report by the 1st of October of last year.
Last year? That's
no,
a year ago.
In 1980.
I see.
But the report wasn't in the hands of the minister until December the 31st, 1980.
So it looks like somebody can't make up their mind about what to do with the place.
Well, that's what it looks like.
What do you think should be done with the place? Keep it as it is?
I think myself it should be kept as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Now, the government agency tells me that the place really isn't suitable for long-term care. For one thing, the elevators aren't big enough. You can't get a stretcher in there, that sort of thing. Has there ever been a problem for you?
No.
Or any of your friends in the building?
Never.
Everybody you know of in here is quite happy?
Yes.
We should make it clear that nobody who's living here now amongst the seniors has been threatened with eviction. They've promised you that you can stay as long as you like. Mm. And that's not good enough for you, is it?
No, it's not good enough for me. When it comes down to that, because there is the possibility they could come along any day and say, okay, you've got to get out.
Yeah, but they've already promised you they aren't going to do that. But...
actually speaking, what is the promise in respect to this government? When it comes down, they can't keep a promise.
You want the NDP to run the building again? Want the NDP to run the building again?
I don't give a damn who runs the building as regards that goes, as long as that. I mean, all right, the seniors here, I don't give a damn whether they're men or women. As regards that goes, we helped build this country and build this province. I consider myself, we have earned this.
Mary Kerr is chairman of the BC Housing Commission.
But, you know, you've got this whole problem where there's 28 suites sitting there empty. You've got a long list of people trying to get into these places. How can you justify something like that?
Well, it's hard to justify except for cost, I think. And for waiting, it's been a long time that we've been waiting for this decision. We don't really try and justify it. We're the managers. We do what we're told.
Because I mean, it's losing money, even more money, by keeping them empty more than...
Yeah, so those empty rooms are on the first 3 floors. And I think there's 21 seniors left now. And we've had to we've reduced our staff because you don't need as many people to take care of 21 people as you did when we had 54.
In pure economics, it makes sense to turn the thing back into a student residence. It'd be cheaper, it'd be more efficient that way, and that sort of thing. At the same time, you've got 21 seniors in there who sort of have the feeling that somebody's sitting in the wings waiting for them to die so they can make some money out of the building.
No, I wouldn't say that. They're free if they can stay as long as they want. Some already have moved out to long-term care facilities where their health breaks down and they have to move out anyway, or they have just decided that maybe there's some better place for them to go.
What's going to happen? I mean, obviously you don't make policy, so you can't say, but the more economic sense is to turn it into something for students.
Well, that's what you think. Why don't you tell that?
What were the recommendations you made about the building?
Those were the 2 that the BC Housing made. Those are our options.
It's either or.
Actually, we made 9, but so we boiled it down to 7 to 2 because the other 7 there was always something the matter with them. These are 2 we could live with.
Well, what does the Commission think about this experiment that was apparently quite successful to begin with by mixing seniors and students together? Is it just not working anymore?
No, it all comes down to cost. It did work just fine initially. The seniors liked the young people. And I think the young people the students stayed longer. I think that there were a lot of BCIT kids there who stayed for semesters. They got to know each other. And with PVI, it's a short-term, 6-week, 8-week sort of a thing, and maybe there's not the feeling.
So the bottom line then is that these 21 seniors who are still there get to keep their place, but
absolutely,
eventually there'll be no more.
Well, that depends.
It depends on the decision.
The government decision may be to redo the whole thing as a seniors resident.
But that's the expensive route.
Everything's expensive these days, Steve, but that is expensive.
So in the meantime, the suites will stay empty?
Yes, they will. Because, well, there's another thing you see here. Even if we wanted to put 28 more people in, long-term care, who licenses that building, long-term care will not extend our license anymore for any more people, because the building is inadequate for that sort of thing.
Mr. Halson, nobody here in your position is being threatened with eviction, but what's wrong with the place now?
Well, there should be more people, more of our own age in here. Right at the present time, we have 30 empty rooms. If they were filled up with, say, people who are just retired, or the majority here are 80 and 90 years old.
So it's getting a bit lonely if you want to do something.
It is. Well, the only thing I have, I'm fortunate, I still have my car. None of the others have. And I go out in the car 3 nights a week. You just get bored. There's nothing to do. Sit in your room.
So with the shuffling of cabinet ministers, so go the decisions. Tony Brummett inherited this one from Jim Chabot, the last Minister of Lands, Parks and Housing. But if economics have anything to do with it, it is very unlikely seniors will play any role in the future of Brentwood House.
I must explain this first letter. It comes from a man called Steve Brodie in Victoria, who is a veteran survivor and one of the leaders of the sit-in demonstrations in the Depression in British Columbia, Vancouver in the 30s, Post Office, Art Gallery, Georgia Hotel, etc. So bear that in mind as I read you Steve's letter, Steve Brodie from Victoria. And it says, "Dear Jack, you tiptoe around the real issue which will end this depression. All so-called economists, politicians, and businessmen are allowed to evade the issue. Have these guests look into the camera, then tell 16 to 26-year-olds what to do during the 2 to 4 years you glibly define as the turning around period. What message have you for the young marrieds who are concerned for their families except to lecture on the free enterprise economy? Not even the NDP dare suggest production for use, not profit. Old J.S. Woodsworth must be turning in his grave. Standing outside public buildings, scaring the seagulls with shouts of "we want work" will avail young people nothing. There are no socialists or communists to blame this time, Jack. These kids are rugged free enterprisers. How rugged remains to be seen. 60 years of propaganda has convinced them that every social improvement is socialism, which of course is communism, and therefore to be shunned. All around them is evidence that capitalism doesn't do them much good either. And that leaves only the economic theory that makes sense to them. Sherwood Forest School of Economics, Professor Robin Hood presiding. Rob the rich to feed the poor. Have you checked the crime rate lately? Full employment of the young is the only answer. To delay it further means disaster. Steve Brodie, whose views haven't changed and his firm political left-wing principles have not changed in all the years in between. And Brodie suffered in the Depression, I can tell you that. Next letter, another social one about capital punishment. What in the hell is the matter with our society today? The senseless murders occurring across British Columbia are frightening. I hope that through the power of your program you demand the death penalty for those found guilty of murder. I don't think that the death penalty was ever rescinded. It was. It's just that we have a nervous and gutless government who will not enforce the penalty. The last referendum showed an overwhelming support by the general public to retain it, but we have a federal government who choose to ignore the people of this country. I ask you, do we have to revert to the lynch mob syndrome to protect ourselves? I realize you don't have the answer, but you can sure as hell create enough of a niche in the mind of those answerable to cause. Please don't dump this in the wastebasket. Just see what you can do, please. Thanks, Jack, for next policeman at Houston, BC. Well, you saw Vander Zalm this morning, and here's a letter about Vander Zalm, which is quite appropriate. Dear Jack, with Vander Zalm talking about the fat at the top and you mentioning feather bedding, don't you think it's time you let the public know the actual costs at the top? District superintendents getting $80,000 a year, more than Mayor Harcourt, more than any MLA, more than Premier Bennett. 75 districts, each with a superintendent. Vancouver has 7, Victoria 5, Burnaby 5, total 92 by 80,000, that's a bit much, $72,160,000. Principals get between 65 and 75, vice principals between 52 and 57. These people do not add one whit to the learning of a child. A.E. Ferguson, Burnaby, BC. And again in schools. Not a bad point in the next letter. Dear Mr. Webster, it's obvious that some school trustees are trying their best to discredit Vander Zalm. And in some cases, this is a conspiracy that is related to teachers, not education. Many trustees have a vested interest in educational contracts, CUPE workers, college instructors, or retired school administrators, and especially spouses of teachers on school boards. They're all here on Vancouver Island as school trustees. I don't see how we can have responsibility from school boards while those with vested interest in the system are allowed to run from office from Nanoose Bay. And here's quite a touching little letter from some students at Clinton, BC. Dear Mr. Vander Zalm, on behalf of the grade 7 class at Clinton Elementary School, I am writing to give our opinions of your interview with Webster. If teachers are ill and substitutes are not provided, what will happen? What will happen to field trips? If teachers are fired, what happens to class size? If class sizes increase, can individual needs be cared for? How would you feel, Mr. Vander Zalm, to be in our shoes right now? Have you taken a personal rollback or cutback? We still have 6 years in a public school system. We are concerned about our future. Are you? And a final letter here. Dear Jack, your show and commentary on the Revelstoke Dam was super. It should be shown again, say after 6 p.m., so many more people and school children can see it. We enjoyed doing the Revelstoke program, the last of the big mega hydro projects in British Columbia for the time being. And I apologize, we can't make special arrangements to run it again because it ran almost a full 90 minutes. On that occasion, it was seen on the midnight rebroadcast on Czech TV, Channel 6. But who knows, might take a day off one day and slap on the Revelstoke Dam again. I enjoyed that job more than anything I've enjoyed in a long while. I believe I have one call here from Nanaimo. Go ahead, please.
I'm a retired school teacher.
Yes, ma'am.
And I am fed up to the teeth with these teachers complaining. I taught 44 students at a time. I had a colleague who taught grade 1 to 12 with 63 students. I could go into the school now with a blackboard and a piece of chalk and teach. I don't need overhead projectors. I don't need... What are they complaining about?
Ma'am, they're complaining about all the years of affluence and find it hard to accept that we're in a time of restraint. Sorry, that's all the time I've got for you this morning. Thank you for waiting, and I shall be back after the break. Have a good program all set for Monday, Thanksgiving Day. It's going to be Mayor Harcourt. It's going to be John Glib Fib Half Baked. It's going to be Harry Irascible Rankin. It's going to be Nathan Mouthy Davinsky, Worn Out Kennedy, May Brown, Mr. and Mrs. Erickson, and other candidates in the civic election. 9 a.m. precisely.
Al Passarell, don't shoot. I am not a grizzly bear.
For a lot of people, they think that it's the promised land. And I say that, let's talk positive rather than talk negative. Webster?
We're a nation of civil servants. Index pensions. More civil servants than people. Is that bitching?
Somewhat.
Best of luck, Roger.
Thank you, Jack.
And it did go in, did it?
Right in the middle.
You sure?
Absolutely.
On oath.
Well, let's not get carried away now.
What kind of wine do you like to drink? What's the first Scottish brand of wine that comes to your mind?
$10 $24 a bottle.